Greetings, everyone. We are live at AI Showbiz Summit 4.0, and this is the moment that I have personally been counting down the minutes for. I've been waiting for this moment, the moment I get to interview in a fireside chat format someone, an iconic person, an Oscar award winning from visual effects expert. Kevin Mack is with us, and he has so much to share about his immersive art. I want to give him the floor for most of this, but I will be asking him some questions. And Robin, thank you so much for showing us live. I'm going to be asking him some predetermined questions, and Kevin will be sharing his responses. And from there, we'll invite the audience. So Kevin, I did want to start with a question that I always like to begin with, which is please share your background with immersive art and being a visual effects pioneer.
Okay, well, I guess I've been dreaming of making art with virtual reality for most of my life, and so it's been something I've always dreamed of. And I was working in the 80s in traditional visual effects, doing matte paintings, miniatures, and concept art, storyboards, etc., animation and whatnot. And I got into computer graphics in the 80s for my own art, to make virtual art, and with the idea of making virtual reality art. And at that time in the 80s, I sort of thought, like a lot of people, that virtual reality was right around the corner. But of course, it turned out that it was not. And but I did, because I had been working in computer graphics and in traditional visual effects, I found myself in the right place at the right time, and I got to help pioneer the use of computer graphics in visual effects. And I got to work on lots of cool movies. I supervised the effects for a lot of big movies. I won an Oscar, and I had a really good time. And along the way, I kept making my computer-generated artwork and making. Initially, it could just be on the monitor, and then they developed Giclée printing, and I could make big prints on canvas that were really nice. And then when 3D printing came along in the 2000s, I started making 3D prints of my sculptures. And then in 2014, when the VR headsets became available for development, I left visual effects and jumped into that full time. So that's what I've been working on ever since.
Yes, yes. And can you talk a little bit about the Oscar that you received?
Well, it's about this tall. It's really heavy, and it was a lot of fun. I won it for the film What Dreams May Come, for the visual effects, and which was a really great project to win for, because it was a movie where the effects were painting and art, a painted world, and these kind of more artistic visual effects.
Well, congratulations. And as I said, it's an honor to have you here on our virtual stage. The next question is, how is the science of awe utilized in your work, well-being, and exploring consciousness?
Well, I guess for me, when I started making art as a child, I was inspired by the experience I had when I saw art, or when I saw some art that really moved me, or I had some experience in nature, whether it was seeing the Grand Canyon, or being moved by an incredible painting or an incredible sculpture. I was really fascinated with the effect that had on me, and I really wanted to be able to give other people that experience with my own work. And so my life has been really about exploring what is it that creates that experience. What is it in art and nature that that generates this experience. And at that time, I didn't think of it as a science thing. It was just an art thing of like, I want to make art that makes people go, wow, look at that. And so over the years, I started delving into neuroscience and the mechanisms of perception and why we respond the way we do to art and nature. And before long, I found that there was a whole science forming around this experience of awe, and it's now recognized as a distinct emotion or experience, and it is this amazing feeling that is transcendent, and it has remarkable effects in that it affects our physiology and our psychology in very positive ways. It allows us to release anti-inflammatories, and it's very positive psychologically. And one of the main things it does that's really, I think, powerful is that it basically incites the experience of or the effect of accommodation. So there's this process of accommodation that when you have an experience of profound awe, you are suddenly forced to reevaluate your model of reality and yourself. And so now you have to kind of go, well, I have this new information, and I have to accommodate this new information into my model of reality and my own identity. And so what happens is this allows people to undergo fundamental positive change. And they've done all these studies and everything, and they've proven it does these remarkable things. It promotes really pro-social behavior. And so in my work, I'm trying to employ every trick I can figure out using neuroscience and perception and just, artistry to generate that experience of awe, of profound, transcendent awe. And I use a number of different tricks for doing this, pareidolia and novelty, the abstraction of work, etc.
Can you elaborate on pareidolia for those who don't know?
Yes, pareidolia is an interesting neurological effect. That is when we see things that aren't there. So we perceive information that isn't present in the stimulus. So the perfect example is when we see faces in clouds or animals, or you might look at some wood grain and see things in that wood, faces or animals, or people see all kinds of things and things all the time. And it's a mechanism that our brains are very good at finding meaningful information within a stimulus that's incomplete or doesn't have enough information. It's dark or it's far away, but we're very good at kind of going, oh, that's my cousin way down the street there. You can recognize things from far away and so on. And so this process, the way it works is that we project information from our own unconscious onto the incomplete information. And so when you're provided with a completely abstract stimulus that has all of the earmarks of meaningful information, like abstract art or whatever, then, or clouds, whatever, there's all this complexity that looks like, hey, that's a thing. I know, I recognize that. That's a catfish riding a bicycle. So we see all these things, and so that's what pareidolia is our brain trying to recognize meaningful information. And it basically makes us hallucinate.
Okay, that explains a lot in my life. Great, thank you for that. Super. Yeah, well, I did want to add for this question, when I was at your studio, I got to meet your Blorbs, and I had euphoria. I mean, I don't know if maybe what people get when they take certain drugs or alcohol, but I was like high for 24 hours. It was amazing. And all I did was put on a headset. It really lifted me. I can't even explain I spoke with them, and you're going to talk about, I don't want to take away the surprise, but I had awe at the beauty of what you had created. And I can see what you mean about well-being, because it does generate that indeed.
Yeah, it's a it's a interesting phenomenon that is there's so many different elements to it, but what I've found in creating these creatures that are alive and arguably conscious,
Mhm.
they are self-aware, but being able to interact with something that's so different from ourselves, it really sheds light and provides insight into the nature of consciousness. And especially when you're immersed in virtual reality and these things are reacting to you and you're reacting to them. And yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with that.
All right. Well, that's a good segue to our next question, which is, tell us about your creations that are featured in the Museum of Other Realities and what we should expect with tonight's teleport time event in VR at the museum. And if I may just give a little context to the viewers, tonight we're having a historic moment at AI Showbiz Summit, and people that know me is I tend to be the first to do things. I'm not sure what that means exactly, but tonight we are going to this. If you have a headset, and particularly one that ties into a PC with like an NVIDIA gaming card, then you have the tools to go to Steam and download the Museum of Other Realities app and teleport yourself. We're all meeting in the auditorium, which you find from the map, because Kevin's giving a talk and a tour of what he's about to show us of his creations. And we also have Dan Mapes, who you may know from Versus, the president of Versus, giving a talk, and then the special tour. And then we're ending in the lounge where you can have a virtual cocktail by reaching into a backpack. It's like nothing. I mean, it's like playing. It reminds me of when I was a little girl and played with paper dolls and things, but for adults. And then it's fun and it's informative, and it's actually a great way to network. So I'll segue into you telling us from your vantage point about tonight's event and your beautiful art that people will get to see. And I just want to add that I do know that some of you don't. It's not inexpensive. But I guess a big pitch to Lenovo and the other makers of these headsets, Oculus, if you aren't able to have this kind of tool, we are recording it tonight and we'll broadcast it hopefully before this show is over. For those, it'll not quite the same 2D, but Kevin, tell us about that.
Well, the Museum of Other Realities, or the MORE as we call it, is this just amazing virtual reality art museum, or museum of other realities, of virtual realities. And it started early on with a few people kind of getting together, and it was informal. It wasn't a commercial product or anything. And they asked me to contribute a piece, so I made a sculpture for them, and then we would get together and have those parties there. And it was just this amazing transcendent thing. You would forget you were in virtual reality, and that you were, you really felt like you were with people. They've done such a wonderful job of making it so that the spatial audio is so effective. If people are further away, they're quieter. When they're closer, you can tell where their voices are coming from. And yet you have this, it's so much like reality. It's very well rendered and beautiful, but you also are not limited by the constraints of reality, and that you can teleport around, you can float, you can shrink and grow giant, and do a number of different things. Anyway, they were revamping it and turning into a bigger project, and they asked me to contribute an exhibit. And so I created what I call Devalaya Rupanam, which is Sanskrit for temple of all kinds of shapes. And it's a big space, huge room with then there's another room below it, and it's got these large structures, creatures. I call them blorts. And it was kind of inspired by a number of different things. One of the inspirations was temples I've seen and visited where, like Notre Dame and so on, where they have these statues of saints all around the walls, or of gods, or of figures everywhere. If you look at like the Sistine Chapel, just all these important deities or icons. And so I wanted to create kind of an abstract version of that. And then it's also, it's kind of a weird combination of things in that it's also inspired by really old-time carousels, like these large structures that you can go inside and around. They also rotate very slowly, and you can get under them, and there's kind of this stuff hanging down, and it's sort of like being on an old-time carousel. But then in the basement is a room where you have a very large kind of monolithic sculpture, and then lots of little ones floating all around, these little blort creatures. And it's just a kind of a meditation room, and they have they're kind of these little watery bubbles with other structures floating in them. And anyway, it's kind of hard to describe. I think, yeah, it's something you got to see.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, and you have a video you were going to share.
Yes, I have a video that is of Anandala, which is my current project that I've been working on for a number of years, that features my artificial intelligent, artificial life creatures. And so let me see if I can get that up here.
I got to transcend the Aladala, and that's when I had my euphoria, and I spoke with the blorts, and you'll get a taste of it here in a moment. It's really quite something special.
All right.
And I just want to say hello again to all our international viewers, the viewers from all over the world joining us today on Facebook Live, as well as here in the Zoom room.
All right, you ready?
Yes. Oh,
okay,
wow.
so that is a little moment of Anandala. Those are blort creatures, and they speak in their own language, and they express themselves. They have when I was designing their behavior system, I discovered some really interesting things. I've been interested in artificial life, for decades now, and I got really into it early on, and then I started to get a little discouraged because I struggled with this idea of I didn't want to create living things that might suffer. I didn't want them to experience the conflict and the struggle to survive, and I didn't want them to experience any of the suffering that natural life experiences. And I was trying to figure out how, in constructing their behavior, how can you tease apart, these elements of life that are so fundamental to what we are. But I found in cognitive science they have classified the motivations for behavior into two categories: intrinsically motivated behavior and extrinsically motivated behavior. And extrinsically motivated behavior are the things we do to achieve other goals. We build a house to get out of the rain, or we work a job we don't like to pay the bills, whatever it is. They're extrinsically motivated, whereas uh, intrinsically motivated behaviors are the behaviors we do just for their own sake.
Yeah.
So art, creativity, music, play, dancing, scientific inquiry and discovery, and the pursuit of well-being, and as well as social interaction. These are things we do for their own sake. So I created this species of creature that are only intrinsically motivated. They don't have to do, they're native to virtual reality. They don't have any of the limitations of biological life.
Uh, I I just want to have them at my house with me. Um, how would that be achieved? I mean, how would one be able to have them with you at all times?
Well, I think that's certainly possible. I've made other apps which are available on Steam. Blortasia is available on Steam, which is a similar world. It has the blorts. They're not as complex. And Anandala will hopefully be releasing before too long. I've got some new things I want to introduce to it now, but I think it will eventually be available. And if you have a VR headset, a PC VR headset, you'll be able to spend as much time with them as you want.
Okay, well then I will have to get one because they're just magnificent, and so are you, Kevin, and all your work. Thank you for your contributions. I think we have time for one question from the audience. So let me pull out something here. Um, they want to know, how did you learn how to do your craft?
Well, it depends on the whole thing about what I'm doing is that it involves a whole lot of different things. And I was certainly, I was raised to be an artist. My parents were artists. They were Disney artists and animators. And so I grew up drawing, painting, sculpting, and animating, and making films and whatnot. Um, but in terms of the technology, that was a whole other thing. I was just very driven early on, back in the 80s, to get into computer graphics, and it was immensely frustrating and difficult. I didn't have the background for that, and it took a lot of work. I had to relearn a lot of math that I had kind of zoned out for in school, and when you go to art college, they don't make you take calculus and stuff. So I had to relearn a lot of that stuff, but a lot of it's really just years and years of experimentation.